right, sounds good.
Awesome. All right. Thank you guys for joining me today. I'm here with Joshua Pearson. If I pronounced that correctly, Pearson, yeah?
That's correct. Yeah, perfect.
Awesome. And we have never met before in person or over Zoom, but we've had a chat over Instagram, and we've agreed to have a very friendly debate about the conversation and topic related to carnivore versus vegan. I'll talk about my stance in a second, but I just thought I might say hi to you, Josh, and get you to introduce yourself a little bit, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, well, maybe we can do a little bit of back and forth on our personal journey. But I'm Joshua Pearson. I'm here in Houston, Texas, and I think this debate kind of spurred off of like a few of the people that I know that are on Instagram, and kind of your interaction with them didn't seem like it was maybe positive from your perspective, and so. I don't think that that's constructive for the overall conversation between, especially our two camps of thought. So I, agreed to come on here and have a debate with you, and because for me, it's this isn't it's not like we're not enemies. I think, in fact, one of the things that one of my talking points to be discussing is that I actually think that even though we have the exact opposite views on probably moral philosophy of eating animals, I think that our two groups actually want the same thing. So one of the things you'll see is that carnivores and vegans both alike are really rooting for cleaning up the environment, having better animal husbandry, better agricultural practices, and stuff like that. So I think we're at a point where there's such a small minority of us that if we work together, in the short run, I think we would be more powerful in advocating for the things that would reduce climate change and reduce some pretty poor practices in agriculture today, and then we can just kill each other later. Yeah. So I think ultimately, that now's not the time to fight each other. Now's the time to work together so that we can get towards that same goal, and then eventually we can look at as more time is spent doing research around the carnivore diet and vegan nutrition. I think that we're still nascent in our understanding of metabolism, and so hopefully this begins to the facts begin to come out a little better. There's a lot of noise and not a lot of signal in the realm of nutrition, right? So, but I'll tell you personally about my journey. So I think it starts at 20 years old. I'm overseas in the Middle East. I spent 3 years, or around 3 years total in the Middle East, Iraq and Afghanistan, a few different stints over there. But I began to have some health problems, and also, despite maybe the outward appearance of being in a war environment, I wasn't a soldier, by the way. I just want to clear that up. I worked for the U.S. government. And so I began to have some health problems. While I was over there, I really got into the study of Buddhism, and Buddhism has a component of no harm to it. So while I'm there, my sole job is to support and ensure the safety of the soldiers. So I did my job with honor and dignity, and it's not about whether or not what I agree with or don't agree with, but I simultaneously took up the study of Buddhism and kind of the philosophy of something that I was trying to understand on my personal journey, and slowly began to have some health problems. And the second time that I went back overseas would have been a little bit later. Those got markedly worse, pretty severe. And so coming home from that experience, and I'm thinking that's somewhere around the age of 25 or 26, I had pretty bad, gastrointestinal reflux disease, high blood pressure, and keep in mind while I'm over there, I'm not drinking alcohol. I'm not living on it's just pretty much standard American diet food, right?
Yeah.
And so I came home and I started trying to study because my health was in pretty poor condition. So the first book I came across was Primal Blueprint by Mark Stiffen. And I did that and got some marked improvement in my health. And, you know, and then of course everybody counters things, but I think over time there was some sort of appeal to go back to that, you know, conscious effort of non-harm. So, and I was in Austin, so it's kind of a, you know, veganism is a little more prevalent in you know, among liberal, you know, society environments. And so I tried it, and I was for pretty strict for 2 years, and my health got significantly worse. And so I didn't know what was going on, and I was following by the book. You know, this is, you know, not eating junk food, because by the time that I came home from overseas, my health was. I haven't eaten fast food in like, you know, 10 years. You know, so that, I mean, that's just my level of like dedication to being healthy. And I started getting like worse, like joint pain, a lot of like inflammation in my body. I got my first gout attack being on the vegan. I didn't recognize it as that then. I thought I just injured my toe, and later it became more prevalent that it was gout. And so let's see. So I kind of went back to this, you know, this primal paleo-esque type diet, but I really wasn't getting the results that I wanted. And over time, my health continued to get worse. And so fast forward to very recent times, you know, this last year was kind of a challenging year for me, and went through a lot of stuff. And my health was like at the lowest it had been. You know, I was having gout attacks probably every other week, and on corticosteroids, and I had, you know, high blood pressure. I had high C-reactive protein that looked, you know, my doctors at first were saying, you know, we don't figure out what this is, how do I have cancer? Like, you know, this is my first cancer scare. You know, I'm looking at, you know, severe reflux disease, arthritis, diagnosed arthritis in my knees and hands. I can barely run. I can barely walk up a flight of stairs. I have heart palpitations. I'm having like, you know, my chest. If I walk up, you know, one flight of stairs, my chest being extremely hard. And it doesn't make sense because I'm not eating unhealthy. I'm not, you know, there's no, you know, sort of co-causal, co-corollary health habits. So, you know, I'm not drinking every day. I'm not doing any of these things. So I go to a doctor. We spent 6 months going through a bunch of stuff. They put me on allopurinol, which is, you know, prophylaxis for gout, right? Gouty arthritis. And I started taking that, but it really took a toll on my energy, and they put me on a plant-based diet. Again, some things cleared up, but I started having really bad arthritis, and I started not being able to run, not being able to wake up in the morning, and the gout attacks started increasing the frequency on a plant-based diet without alcohol, without anything else. And so, and this is, you know, prepared at home, not packaged vegan food. This is, you know, buying, you know, tofu, buying beans, you know, cooking them up. Very, very clean diet. And so, you know, even though this is anecdotal, this is N equals 1, I finally just had enough and said, you know, look, you know, I started reading, I came across the Carnivore Code, and it intrigued me because, you know, I did it in a biochemistry lab for 3 years, so I'm pretty, you know, up to snuff on science, I guess you could say. And some of the evidence in there made sense to me. And I really like Paul Saladino's book. It's called The Carnivore Code. And so I tried it, and it has revolutionized my health personally. You know, I can't say that that's going to fit the mold for every person out there, but for me, taking plant foods out of my diet has been fantastic. And I have at times added it back in. And this has been a 2.5 month journey for me, right? But I have at times just like, I'm going to try it today and see what happens. And it is fairly interesting to see some foods give me severe symptoms. So for me, a plant-based diet is not even an option. It's a matter of like life and death for me. But anyways, I'll let you tell your story. That's kind of how I got here.
That's a lot to take in. I want to go back to kind of the start, and first of all say that I really appreciate you taking the time to be here today, not just because of your time, but because I have offered a debate, a discussion, which I believe to be a neutral ground to many carnivores as well as omnivores, and they've all declined it. And and for a lot of the people, and I'm sure this happens for vegans as well, I can't have a reasonable conversation with them. So I really, really appreciate you taking the time for this as well. So I hope my stance on the matter is, what I'll be discussing today is not directed solely to carnivores. My sort of stance is towards omnivores and carnivores. So just a little bit of background on myself as well. For anyone, I know for scientific purposes, it's important to sort of put out any sort of personal bias that you might have. I am a vegan myself. I'll discuss how long I've been vegan in a second. But my journey started off always being in the fitness industry. I started even straight after school. I just went straight to studying fitness and loved it so much that I just kept expanding my knowledge. And during that time, I grew my business to, excuse me, to work with people on flexible dieting and understanding that you can enjoy life to its fullest and still have things that you enjoy in moderation. And that's probably the primary reason I refuted veganism, because in my mind, it was sort of, what's the word? It stopped you from enjoying life to the fullest. And it was kind of, oh man, I've lost the word now. It was restrictive. That's the word.
Yeah, restrictive.
So that was in my mind what sort of the reason I didn't, I thought veganism wasn't the right approach, because it created this restrictive barrier, right? And for me, in the mindset, and I still believe this to this day, is that, when you create this forbidden fruit effect, it makes situations worse. So I wasn't vegan for a long time, and learning about veganism, not from a research point of view, but just from a logical point of view on people discussing it and having conversations with people, I realized that there are probably hundreds, thousands, if not millions of reasons people don't go vegan, right? And I had all of them. And slowly but surely, each of those reasons just kept getting popped. Like it was just like protein. Well, that's not true, pop. And then it was just like B12, that's not true, pop. Like it was just like all these different things over, I'd probably say a 2-year period. And all of a sudden, I just realized that all that popping, I just kind of ran out of reasons not to go vegan. I grew up with a mother who was very environment focused, and I could kind of see what animal agriculture was doing to the environment. So at that point, I kind of told myself, hey, I know a fair bit about nutrition. I've studied nutrition with Precision Nutrition, which is not a vegan organization. They are not against veganism. They're not for it either, right? They're kind of a neutral ground. And, I knew quite a bit about nutrition. So I said to myself, hey, like, there's no real problem if I just substitute some of the foods that I've got to meet my daily calorie and macro requirements and try it out for a month, right? And I even posted about it on Facebook. I said, hey guys, I'm doing this social experiment where I'm going to go vegan for a month and see how I go. And like anecdotally speaking, I saw kind of like inflammation go down instantly. I felt great. I felt like I had more energy. I felt like my mind was a bit clearer. So there's a few anecdotal things in there, but just for me, I was just like, I didn't go into this experiment trying to be like, oh yeah, like veganism is the way. I just was trying to have a very neutral approach to it, to the point where after the month, I announced that I'd finished the month, but I wasn't going to stop. I wasn't going to stop being vegan. And that's how I kind of first got into it. And people were kind of messaging me, leaving comments, leaving like all sorts of reactions where they were just like, how come you're not stopping this and that? And I thought, and the thing that came to my mind was that, if I can achieve my fitness goals with animal products or without animal products, why wouldn't I just choose the one that reduces, in my opinion, based on what we're going to discuss, has the least environmental impact, has the least, harm towards animals. And, again, anecdotally for me, the health reason was the sort of least important. For me, originally, I went vegan for environmental purposes. My stance now is that for me, veganism is mostly towards a social injustice, which I will discuss is based on what the oldest vegan organization state now, the Vegan Society. So yeah, basically I just stuck to that. And like all of a sudden I was getting stronger. I wouldn't say at any faster or slower rate. It was just the same sort of rate. I was still increasing muscle mass. I have competed 4 times in bodybuilding, eating animal products, and I did fine. And I did my 5th competition as a vegan, and I was at my biggest muscle mass and at my leanest body fat percentage, which was about 2 or 3 years after being vegan. So it wasn't like a month in or anything like that. And I also did my first powerlifting meet where I hit personal best on every single lift. So I did my best squat ever, which is 185 kilos. I did my best bench press ever, which is 125 kilos. And then I did my best deadlift, which was 215 kilos, right? And this was all after spending years and years being vegan, right? And to me, it was just a no-brainer. Now, originally, when I first went vegan, I kind of told myself that I wasn't going to be one of those pushy vegans or anything like that. And I don't feel like I am a pushy vegan to this day, but I do feel like because my beliefs are more towards social injustice, I do my best to have a voice for the voiceless, which has been good and bad because I get lots of negativity, obviously, from the carnivore community and even some omnivores. But at the same time, I've had many people message me saying, "Hey, I'm doing Veganuary," or I'm going to go vegan for this time," or like I tried tofu for the first time, right? And I don't even know half of these people, and they're just like sending me all these messages, which to me is great because it means I'm having some sort of an influence on them in what I feel to be the right thing. So that's a little bit about my backstory. I'll be vegan 4 years in October. And I can't see any sign of me ever going backwards on that. Yeah, not sure how you like my intro.
No, I love it. That's great. No, it's so well. First of all, congratulations on the competitions, and and that's it's interesting to see that you didn't see any loss in performance. For me, certainly, like in the past when I was vegan, I was a fairly competitive runner, not professionally, but just like I would go run races like 10Ks and half marathons and stuff like that. And I was fast, wasn't having that symptom, wasn't losing performance. So you've been vegan now for 4 years, okay?
Yeah.
And you competed. I guess this 5th competition you did was a couple of years ago.
Yeah. So my competition was, I'd say, about a year and a half ago. So maybe 2.5 years vegan. So that's where I was at. Like to kind of go back to, I guess, why we're here as well. One of the main topics that I brought up for this discussion, because like the debate could be, the discussion that we have could be on anything, right? It could be the carnivore veganism, like which is better for insert whatever you want to kind of put in there, right? Today, I'm mostly kind of interested in the philosophical belief because of the fact that that's how this conversation kind of started. And it had to do with a very interesting caption, the bio of someone's Instagram, right? So for me, like, I'll first define what veganism means to me, as well as what the oldest vegan organization states it to be. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. Are you familiar with it?
This is a vegan society.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a high likelihood I've read something there, sort of like seen a link or something. No, it's not coming to mind.
Got you. Yeah. Like, I mean, I've kind of worked with this for quite a while now, to the point where, in my opinion, I think a lot of vegans agree with this, right? Now, I think a lot of vegans have veganism wrong. Like, they don't understand veganism at all. Like, I've had people say like, "Oh, that Coca-Cola is not vegan because it's unhealthy." And it's like, well, that's true, but that's not what veganism is, right? That's just like, again, a straw man towards the definition. So in my view, veganism is a philosophy and way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as possible and practicable, all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any other purposes, and by extension promotes the development and use of animal-free alternatives for the benefits of animals, humans, and the environment. In dietary terms, it denotes the practice of dispensing with all products derived wholly or partly from animal products. So I kind of want to start off by saying, like, what's your view on this? Do you agree with this? Do you not agree with it?
So yeah, this is and you know, certainly my philosophy has evolved over time personally, from not even the standpoint of veganism, but you know, whether or not we support war, or whether or not we support violence, or is there some sort of, you know, categorical or moral imperative to do no harm, right? And where does our concept of nonviolence come from? So I would say, as far as veganism, you know, it's the way that I look at veganism and the way that I look at animal and plant agriculture. If we were to go back to more natural systems, I don't fundamentally agree with that. I mean, fundamentally, I believe that we are hyper carnivorous omnivores, you know, by evolutionary standards, right? And so, whether we like killing animals, I don't know that. To me, that is a social layer that we've added as human beings over time. And I'm not saying that there's no use for that. Like, you know, we obviously, like, there's also a social layer of not, you know, killing our, you know, coworkers, right, or people around us. But that's also useful for the species, right? So there's no, you don't, like, you know, I see some of the arguments sometimes, like, well, if you would eat animals, would you eat each other? And well, you know, cannibalism has all kinds of issues with, like, prions and disease and things like that, right? So, and it's not good for the fecundity of the species. So, you know, so for me, they're not the same, you know. I don't know that we know much about the sentience of animals. I'm not going to make the argument. I think it's ignorant to make the argument that animals don't have some level of cognitive awareness of things. I mean, you know, I have stray cats that come up here and eat. You know, I've also, having hunted and not hunted, right? You know, I see the arguments for it, but I'm willing to accept that as just a part of the natural cycle of life. And for me, in fact, if I could, you know, live off the land, so to speak, in a very natural way, but still participate in society in the ways that I enjoy, I would much rather do that. And if a bear eats me, then I'm good with it. Like, it, to me, that is just a part of what I'm willing to accept as death. So, like, even though that's not pleasant for me, neither is dying of, like, dementia in a hospital bed, hooked up to intubated machines and stuff like that. So for me, that is a very non-natural, non-glorified way of dying. Right. So I would much rather participate in the system, being a predator and having other predators, you know, pursue me as a predator, right? Like, to me, that's very natural. And then we can get into the, you know, the environmental and all that other aspect. But from a philosophical standpoint, I'm okay with eating animals now. I struggle with it. I did go through the same thing that you did. You know, I have read that philosophy before. I agree with that philosophy fitting the definition of what veganism is. And you have a wide range of veganism, right? Some people are like, well, these vegans aren't healthy, these vegans or whatever. But I mean, you can drink, you know, well, I don't know specifically if there's something that Coca-Cola is doing that's not vegan, but you know, you could essentially have sugar or something like that. But my concern is that what we've done with modern society is that we've outsourced and hidden the amount of harm done in plant-based agriculture. And so I think we live in a very false view of not creating harm. So for me, that comes back to first principles thinking, which is, you know, anytime, so first principles, I'll explain to people that may not be familiar with it, it's like an inviolable law, like of the highest order, you know, this law, like if you ever violate this law, you're probably wrong, right? Or you're 100% likely to be wrong. And so, you know, the law of thermodynamics, right? You know, the first law of thermodynamics, energy cannot be created nor destroyed, right? So as we live on this earth, we are taking energy from something else, right? When we're created here, that energy has transforms to us. The more of us, the less of those things, right? So as we expand human population, as we expand societies, and as we build cities and we drive cars, and we take all these resources, we're converting this up, and that is directly killing animals. I mean, to me, you know, and so we're doing damage by scaling up in mass, whether we want to eat plants or animals.
Yeah, I guess my stance on it, and I think I watched someone explain a video once. They're saying, you know, vegans should stop saying these things. And I watched the video, and it was very interesting because he was talking about how we shouldn't say we're cruelty free, because veganism is not victimless. Like, veganism doesn't mean that you are 100% pure and you don't contribute to any sort of suffering and death. I guess the point of the philosophical definition, the one I just showed you, is the one as far as practicable as possible. So for example, a lot of people like to use the example of stranded on a desert island, or tribes in Africa, or stuff like that. And in many ways, that's some sort of justified intention and justified necessity, right? My problem with the sort of stance on carnivore is that, you know, it's, especially carnivores, like we're having this conversation now through Zoom on a computer with light switches and our cars outside. The whole nature discussion just kind of gets thrown out the window. And I'm not against nature. It's not like I encourage people to just, you know, connect themselves to the matrix or anything like that. But it's just more about understanding that we live in a society where, first of all, I believe we have a very large population. Many people could argue that, oh yeah, if we just killed lots of humans, the environment would be better. Yeah, but that's not a practical solution, in my opinion. So, I mean, there was a few points that you brought up there, and I think a lot of them tied into sort of health behind it as well. So I kind of want to just try and stick to one point at a time to avoid confusion as well. One of the points that kind of sparked the conversation on Instagram for us was me, I guess you could say, ridiculing. I try not to ridicule people or character attack them, but I ridiculed a bio that this person had, which I can read out the bio for you as well. So a carnivore diet is more vegan than veganism. Mm-hmm. That to me is one of the most illogical things. I'm not sure if it makes sense, but are you able to explain that to me? If you agree with that, yeah.
And I'm not going to put words in this guy's mouth, because carnivore is vegan. Is you know, one of these people, one of these unfaced carnivores on Instagram, right? But yeah. So for me, I'm very intentional in what I eat. So I'm only eating ruminants, and so now I can't also, like, we don't have the body counts of every single habit that we do. We don't have the body counts of what we drive, and you know, presumably we can infer some sort of, we can make a regression analysis, let's say, of like plant farming and how, you know, we say avocados appears kill 30 to 40,000 gophers or something like that, prairie dogs, they are, per 10 acres every year, right? And so when you think about that number is pretty extreme number of life that's lost. I can eat, you know, 2 to 3 cows a year. Yeah. And so for me, you know, the direct number of animals that are harmed and are killed, it would appear are drastically less on my diet, at least from all outward appearances. And I mean, you know, no one has all these numbers. You know, we can try. I just have to make the best guess at like what I know about plant-based agriculture. You know, especially as it's done in monocropping, right? That's not only you're spraying pesticides, fungicides, you know, all of these things, and it can be on an organic farm too. I think there's a lot of like misconception about what organic farming means. Organic means that as long as they use up to 98% organic pesticides and herbicides and fungicides, they qualify as organic, at least in America, right? That's the American definition of that. So you can spray something that's chemically identical to a petroleum-based, you know, fertilizer. And I'm going to tell you what, for me, as you know, somebody who has a nice relationship with science, I look at that as a chemical is chemical, right? And your body's going to react to the chemical the same way, and so is the environment, so are all the animals and bugs. The soil on, you know, for, you know, on monocrop agriculture is dead. You basically have to create a scorched earth scenario to manage crop yields, right? And large enough to feed people. And so if this is such a bad comparison, because I can't, you know, compare monocrop agriculture, you know, plant agriculture with you know, regenerative, you know, cattle production, right? The real one should be like, hey, what about localized food production versus, you know, plant-based food production versus this? Because you're going to bring up CAFOs, which are an obvious problem for carnivores and for me. I fundamentally disagree with cows being raised on concrete and fed grains their whole life.
Yep.
But to answer that question, I think that if we were looking at total number of lives killed, I think that if somebody were to do the carnivore diet right, it would be significantly less. I do not know what that factor is. I want to say it's probably in a magnitude of hundreds or thousands, maybe.
So the problem I've seen with that as well, because I think you kind of put up a bit, you kind of mentioned it there. A lot of people compare, let's just say animal agriculture versus plant agriculture. There is a spectrum, there is a scale of each, right? You could just say
Sure.
a backyard farm or a backyard sort of situation where you've got a couple of cows or something versus like I've lost it now. Factory farming.
Yeah, factory farming.
Right. You've got like this spectrum, right? And the problem I have with these sort of arguments is that people compare the best case scenario of backyard farming with the worst case scenario of plant farming. And I can see why people do that, but at the same time, that's not really a fair comparison because it's not practical for every single person on this planet to have two cows in the backyard, right? Anything like that. And the same could be argued. So like if you want to argue backyard cows, okay, well, the argument needs to be with backyard tomatoes or something like that, right?
Of course.
So like and that spectrum, like there is an overlap. I don't deny that. And I know, and I can definitely, I can't deny that there are probably some insects and bugs and gophers and rats and whatever that probably get trapped in these sort of machines. I don't know how much. I don't think there's a really good way to find out how much. I do believe that it's not as high as what people assume it to be because these animals aren't forced into it. They can move around. They can get away. But it does come down to the argument before on practicable as possible. It comes to that justified necessity and justified intention. There is no intention on killing these animals, and there's no, it's not justified because there is a necessity for plant-based foods, right? For many people in the world. The problem I have with your argument on, I just killed 2 cows as opposed for the year, as opposed to, plant-based foods which kill lots of gophers or whatever, is that the 2 cows need to eat something as well. And what do those animals eat? Like you could argue grass, but the reality is that if we have to talk about it in reality. In reality, 80-90% of the cows are not being grass-fed. And even if we did, we would need significantly more land space, which means chopping down more trees. Do you see where I'm going with this?
Oh, well, I'm going to make that same argument for plant-based agriculture. Yeah, I have not seen that now. So I have seen that number turned on its head. So almost all, if a cow's not grass-fed, grass-finished, right? Still the majority, I think some 85% of cattle in the U.S. are raised on grass for the first, majority of their life, right? It's only the last 6 months to some period of time that they're put on a CAFO and fattened up. Personally, for taste preference, it literally is nothing. It's a gimmick, right? We don't necessarily need this. I think that it is competitive with the environment to duplicate animals. So we're getting the worst of both worlds, right? We're putting these animals in concentrated feeding operations. Are creating all kinds of pollutants because now all the toxins are concentrated. And on top of that, you're raising food crops for them that are taking this competitive space with other land deforestation, stuff like that. You've now created the perfect storm for the worst of both sides of agriculture in general, right? And so for me, it's not necessary to feed them on anything but grass. And when they live on grass, that's totally in symbiosis with nature, right? The stuff that they do is produce little waste. I mean, there's methane. We can get into all the environmental stuff later, but I would agree with you. I don't think that feeding them corn and grain is necessary, but people's taste profiles of like the fattier it is, and like the sweeter it is. Like the meat tastes better when it's not grass fed. It is. It's sweeter. Wild game is gamey. It's not like the average person doesn't like wild
Yeah. Yeah.
game. So,
Okay. So like back to the original post on the bio, I think it was interesting because there was kind of two parts to what I wanted to get out there. Number one is obviously discussing what that means exactly, that veganism is more carnivore.
Yeah.
Carnivore is more vegan. So like by extension, does that logic mean that veganism is more carnivore than carnivore?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to go on to that. Let's talk about that. So you were talking about intention, about direct intention to kill versus.
Yes.
And that does seem to be the sort of crux of the moral philosophy against directly killing animals. I mean, presumably at this point you wouldn't be able to shoot a deer, right? And so there's an example that I like to use about intention because it's something that I've studied a lot from a philosophical standpoint, not related whatsoever to nutrition, but just in general about like what does it mean to not harm, right? And for me, what I feel I have is a much more nuanced version of that. And so an example I like to give is that you have, let's say, some village in a poor country, right? And you travel over there and you visit this village, and you see these people that are wonderfully happy, but they suffer from disease and illnesses. And you look at the source of that disease and illness, and you find that it's a lack of clean drinking water, right? And so you get excited, come back to America, and you're like, look, I want to make a change in the world. I want to do something positive for other people. I want my life to mean something. I think those are all noble pursuits, right? So then we decide to start like an organization to drill wells for water, right? So that they don't have to, because the river thing is a foregone conclusion. People are bathing.
Yeah.
There's chemical dumping stuff over there because they don't have the governmental controls, right? That stop illegal dumping and stuff. They can't drink this water, so we can drill wells for them. Okay, and so we drill the wells. But other tribes in the area that don't have this, for whom you have not drilled a well, are seeing that these people are now thriving and they're not. And so they come over and kill the other tribe for that resource. Yeah. Right? Because they're only that resource, at least with that one well, is only going to hold so many people. So now they're in competition with each other. Yeah. Have you created, to me, have you created this negative outcome? Regardless of your intention, you've been directly involved with the murder of this tribe, right? And so for me, that's the principle of no harm for me. So like intention is not good enough for me. Like in my ethos is that intentions don't matter. It is the outcome that matters, right? So that's why I have a problem with this today, at least with that philosophy. But I understand you certainly, I'll let you elaborate on your version of that. But
yeah, I guess like the first thing that kind of comes to mind when you talk about that is something I read is that not everyone is in a position to help others, in this case, help animals or protect animals, but we're all in a position to not harm them. So to not cause that harm, right? So that's a really interesting example. I've never really thought about anything like that in regards to, having good intentions and then it kind of going back on you as well. I think like for me, like I think there's always going to be situations in life, like for example, murder and rape and stuff like that. These things are all illegal, right? Will we always get rid of murder and rape? No, it's never going to be 0%, I think, right? But the point is that you have an intention to minimize it as much as possible. I believe that by having for the majority of people on this planet were to transition to a vegan diet, we would get too close to zero as much as possible. Because the example you gave, which is like you kind of helping one tribe and then another tribe destroys the other tribe. I feel like by helping people go vegan, we essentially can help all these people to the point where this other tribe won't feel like they would need to intervene with a different tribe, right? Like I'll give you an example, which is for me, subsidies on animal products, right? There's so much money paid on subsidies for animal products, as opposed to using that money towards paying for other stuff like making food more affordable for the poor or anything like that, right? We're using a false economy. We're basically just pretending to we're giving money from taxpayers' dollars into killing animals to then feed people to, in my opinion, make them sick and then repeat the cycle, right? And it's not perfect. It's not imperfect, but it's also something like if we were to transition away from that, it would move us in the right direction. And people are going to complain. People are going to say like, oh, I want my meat to be cheaper. I want this to be cheaper. And I get that, but it's like, for me, it's about the long game. And we've spent thousands and thousands of years eating animal products. And I don't feel that, we've improved our health. Like in my opinion, we're becoming healthier by introducing more plant-based products, just like our closest living relatives, like the bonobos and other sort of chimps and stuff like that, right? These animals eat a predominantly plant-based diet. So I keep going back to diet again, but this is, I'm pretty sure, I don't know.
I mean, that's the crux of this whole conversation, right? It really comes down to diet, but it has all of these external externalities, the economic. So that subsidy argument applies to plant-based agriculture too, significantly. We subsidize all agriculture globally, and there is no way around it. If the intention is well-meaning, it's low-cost food, so that you're like these necessities, right, of nutrition, of calorie, really, are met for people of low income, right? And unfortunately, there's some unintended consequence of that, is that it creates cheap food, which makes it easier for people to waste, and it changes the means of which we're willing to, from a corporate standpoint, what's profitable, to shift our production means to a more, automated, more destructive production. But I'm trying to figure out how we go, because there really is so many potential ways that we can go down this argument. So we have more than just a few thousand years of eating meat. We have like 2.5 million years of eating meat, and I can screen share something for you. So I think relatively recently they've started doing. Let's switch over to.
I think I need to give you access if you want to screen share.
Okay. They've started doing some like stable isotope testing of collagen and stuff. Let me see, screen 2. All right, so you can see the screen here, right?
Yep.
So this is one of like several studies. I'm just going to scroll back up here. So this is on nature.com. This is stable isotopes reveal that patterns of diet and mobility in the last Neanderthals and first modern humans in Europe. So this is upper Pleistocene modern humans, which is, I think it was 45 to 43,000 before present day. When was this written? Published in March 2019. Right? So relatively recent information coming out of the archaeological world about diet. We just didn't have this data before. I mean, this really has, like, as far as I know, unless somebody's been doing this and I didn't know about it, I think this is kind of like in the last decade or so have we even started getting this data. So this is like a carbon and sulfur ratio. So what like early hominids is what we found in like analyzing these bones is that you can look at these isotopes of nitrogen, sulfur, carbon, and they resemble in the bone, like they store in the bones of the people that eat them. These isotopes that mirror what their prey was, right? So if you look at this group right here, this is the group of carnivores, right? This is the narrow range of, it's like the narrow range of like the sulfur compounds and carbon. And here we are with lions, wolves, and hyenas. and us. That's Homo sapiens, right? So we've been carnivore for, or at least hyper carnivorous. And to be honest with you, I'm gonna stop sharing this deal, but I actually I hate the term carnivore because it implies that we should eat 100% meat, and there are people making that argument, and I see the argument from Paul's standpoint that plants are inherently toxic, and we can get to that later. There's never been a hominid species ever, and very few animals, that are 100% carnivore, that I know of. I mean, a lion is an obligate carnivore. Big cats are obligate carnivores, but wolves, people call them carnivores. They're not carnivores. They're omnivores. I mean, they primarily eat probably 80, 70, 80, 90% of their diet is going to be meat driven, but they're all going to have some plant stuff. Right.
I think that's a really good point, actually. If you could discuss quickly, because I would have assumed you're only eating meat, right? For anyone kind of watching, like, I'm not sure what the term carnivore means, and if you feel other people who also say a carnivore are on the same page as you, or if they have a sort of branch off of the carnivore.
Sure. Yeah, there is definitely a lot of forks in the road of carnivores. So there are, and I've seen recently, I think, I hope I'm not misquoting this or reading this somewhere and making a mistake on this, but I think Dr. Paul Saladino, so his book, argues primarily for a meat-based diet. It is called the Carnivore Code. It does talk about, some maybe not being ideal, but some non-sweet fruits and some fruits actually being edible. So, in the evolution of plants, right, there are certain plants that were okay with being eaten, and that was fruits, right? Because they have seeds in them, they want you to eat them, so they're not toxic, they're brightly colored. They've done everything evolutionarily to say, hey, here's my gift to you, eat me. And that way, when you defecate, you spread my species out, right? So that I can become, more plant, more of myself, right? And so those things do seem to be edible. I do occasionally eat fruit. But the majority of my diet, and I have not calculated it calorie for calorie, but I would have to say it's got to be in the very high 90% meat and organs and salt and water. I've tried adding different things just to see how I feel. And I started having some negative results on it. So, I haven't been doing this a horrifically long time, 2.5 months, almost 3 months, is what I would call baby carnivore, right? So I'm pretty new to it. Maybe carnivore is the wrong term, but it's a less of a mouthful than hyper carnivorous omnivore. Maybe we'll just call it HCO for the future, but I've not seen personally. I don't see any evidence that humans haven't eaten plants ever. Even the example of the Inuit tribes and stuff like that, they eat berries in the wintertime. Like they eat berries. There's going to be some plant-based food in all hominid species that throughout history, right? But the majority of our diet has been evolutionary meat.
Yep.
Up until agriculture, which is like 10,000 years ago, right? And we've also seen a major decline in our bone structure, on brain size, and all those things, which I'm sure you're aware of.
Yep. So I guess my stance on the whole topic as well is that we can go to this sort of like data later as well, but my stance, just based on my understanding of it, is that human beings can thrive on a plant-based diet. I've had people talk to me about, being omnivore, quote unquote, having the best of both worlds. My sort of conversation towards that is, my problem with that is that if you can do exactly the same thing without eating animal products, then why wouldn't you? So it kind of begs the question, what nutrients or combination of nutrients or chemical compounds or whatever you want to call it are in animal products that cannot be found in plant-based products that is important for human health and performance, you could say as well.
Right. So I mean, there's I think like the nitric oxide components higher. You have creatine, creatine compounds, the protein, the digestibility and availability of protein seems to be significantly higher in eggs and meat. I found a chart on that over the last month. I could probably try to dig it up, but as far as like the protein density and caloric density of that food, I've not found that. I think plants do. So we're just talking about like on a micronutrient basis. I think that you can find them in both, right? I would be interested on your argument on the B12 thing because I see very little prevalence of that in plant-based foods, but and have seen people injecting B12, on a vegan diet, like athletes and stuff like that. But the problem for me is that plants come with a whole host of other compounds that are not desirable for the body, and I'm going to make one like jump back to the left in history to talk about something from the ethical standpoint. And I don't mean this to be like a reductive argument that nobody can, it's like not moral dumbfounding, right? But my question is, why are we only considering animals to be sentient? Because plants do communicate with each other when they're being killed. We know that trees now communicate with each other. We know that fungi communicate with each other. So just because we don't understand the complexity of something living, I don't know that it's, at least for me, I don't know that killing plants is any better than killing animals. Right? Like a plant inherently does not want its roots or its green leafy parts, which are its energy production centers. There's chlorophyll production centers to be eaten. It doesn't. It wants its fruits to be eaten, but that's about it. And that limits your number of species of plants that want to be eaten significantly, to the point that you really couldn't live on it unless you're trying to go down the fruitarian route. But we've seen pretty devastating health effects when people that have done that. So I would say that animal nutrition, and plant nutrition, yes, you can get the same micronutrients. You can manufacture that micronutrients profile even if you want to. But I would say that, the plants come with a whole extra host of, phytochemicals that are pretty, at least from what it looks like to me, based on the evidence that, that some of these books have brought forth, is that they're pretty toxic to human beings in large quantities.
That's a very interesting argument, because I feel it's the opposite, actually, because you could argue that there are chemical compounds in some plants. Like, obviously, I'm not getting people to go out and eat poisonous berries, right? If you were to get like a list of animal products that are very typical in a American diet, you could say, and a list of plant-based products which are very typical. Again, let's just say I can't think of any others, right, besides rice, beans, lentils, those sorts of foods. If you were to compare them in regards to benefits, I think they would be very similar. Like, you could say things like protein, calcium, all those sort of things are found in both. In regards to bioavailability and things like that, it's funnily enough, I watched Vegan Gains explain a study about how that's not actually the case, how they're actually very, very similar in regards to bioavailability. But when you get these sort of things next to it as well, like you go, yeah, cool. Like, you've got protein, you've got these things. I do think there is a little bit of an edge with plants because of fiber. Now, you could argue the opposite with fiber, but again, in my opinion, I think human beings benefit mostly greatly from fiber, the right amount anyway. But then when you get the list of negatives next to it, when you're talking about cholesterol, naturally occurring saturated fat, trans fat, naturally occurring heme iron, those sorts of things, they straight away just start making me lean towards the plant-based option being better for human health. Now, it's not to say that you can't increase your blood serum cholesterol on a plant-based diet, because you could just eat lots of oils and crappy foods, but it's mostly like, I'm just talking about like in general terms. In general, I think because of this information, we can conclude that plant-based diet, a whole food plant-based diet, is going to, minimally processed, is going to be more beneficial towards human health. And I'm not talking about your health in particular, or other people who might have any sort of similar condition. I'm talking in general terms.
Yeah. So, and so here's my question. So, like, a lot of the nutritional philosophy for, going plant-based and I'm going to call it philosophy because I'm not sure that I can 100% call any of this science, even on our side. And I'll explain that in detail too. But it came from the sort of the Ansel Keys era and the like lipid hypothesis, and you know, I don't know if I'm sure you well heard that like the sugar industry basically funded the anti-fat, anti-saturated fat stuff. But my question is, so for you, you're saying, yeah, you're concerned about the environment and the saturated fats and cholesterol and all those things. That for me, the reason that those have become a problem and not a causation of arteriosclerosis. Wow, that's a mouthful. I couldn't get that one out this morning. And so that's more of a correlation and not causation. And the reason that we're starting to see the arteriosclerosis in people that consume meat is because now they have all this fat and cholesterol in their diet, but they also have a ton of sugar, and a ton of carbohydrate, and a ton of modern foods that are inflammatory, and alcohol, and cigarettes, and all whatever the things are that, you know, that compound with those and create the problem. And so when I take all of that you know, the influence of, you know, carbohydrate out of my diet and all the junk food out of my diet, you know, cholesterol and saturated fats, like one of the greatest sources of your hormone production and your testosterone production, which would be interesting to see. Maybe we should do, I mean, you couldn't do it now. It'd be interesting to see if we could catch some people like before they're transitioning to something and like benchmark, you know, some blood markers of testosterone.
They have done that. I have seen them. I like there's not debating, but they do blood work on vegans who have been vegan for like 5 years, and then carnivores, and they switch their diets and they do their blood work, testosterone, like everything. I can find that for you as well.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I mean, yeah, it would be fun to share that stuff. I mean, I always want that information. For me, this is not a journey of religion; it's a journey of truth, right? And so what I see from both of our sides, you know, the carnivore and vegan diet tends to attract the extremists in both camps. And for a lot of people, this becomes dogma, right? There's a lot of things tied around, emotional things tied around the belief in this. For me, it is purely scientific. If my logic doesn't stand, that it's, you know, healthier for humans, if it's not healthier for the planet, then it's wrong, right? You know, but I believe it is fundamentally. And that's kind of what we're trying to scratch out, you know, over a period of time. I don't think we're going to get it all in one sitting either. But
I have like 2 pages worth of like resources and sorry. I have like so many resources and links and stuff I wanted to go through it, and I don't think we're going to have time. I want to just check. Have you got a few minutes as well? I'm not.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah,
so I just. You have a few minutes, cool. I'll kind of wrap things up with a few questions. I just wanted to line up towards the end here, right? And I appreciate that you're like the circumstances that you're in is due to your own personal health reasons as well, because I imagine you're someone who wants to stay alive. So obviously you trying to do your best with that. My question to you is sort of disregarding your sort of own health concerns and your own the way you are, who you are, your personality, those sorts of things. What sort of evidence or information would you have to observe to take my stance on the matter?
So we're going to need a pretty good, honest assessment of like, you know, the like land use, permitting, you know, and greenhouse gas emissions. So I've looked at the greenhouse gas emissions data.
Yeah.
There's a wide variety of sources that have published it. The EPA's published one.
Yeah.
The cattle industry has published their own, of course. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and that's okay, but it's problematic. Now, I did read this study, and the study looks like they did take there were 7 regions that they pulled the you know, greenhouse gas emission data from the cows that are methane production and stuff like that. It still seems like such a low percentage of total greenhouse gas emissions that it's like, I mean, it's really the hill we're going to die on. This is like the lowest of the lowest amount of fruit, and we're not factoring in at all the fact that, you know, regeneratively raised, you know, cows actually should be a net carbon sink because the grasses that they're eating on, feeding on, and then that grows back and sequesters carbon into the soil. And you can even see it and measure it in the soil beneath that versus the farm, right? Or a plant-based farm versus regenerative, cattle operation is very, very carbon-dense soil, very nutrient-rich soil. I mean, the thing is, I've seen all of it. I mean, not all of it, right? I mean, there's tens of thousands of studies, and everybody's coming out with this stuff. So I would love to keep seeing it. But I would love to see some comparisons, and I don't think we have it yet, or anything that's objective in the realm of scientific nutrition. So, like, for me, it's two things that make up our philosophies stand the ground, right? That they're good for human health and they're good for planetary health, and they're good for animal health, right? So if these three things don't work out, or one of these legs is broken, if we're like, oh, health, humans are super healthy, but we're going to kill ourselves in 20 years because we're going to burn the planet up, then this doesn't work, right? And so we kind of have to balance between all these things. I'm looking for anything that would tell me that regenerative agriculture is the way, and I have not found it. And I've not found any objective data. And the problem with all the nutritional stuff we're looking at is very reductionist science. It's very a lot of it's not done in vitro, or a lot of it relies on self-reporting, or it relies on and even the best models in medical science. Okay, I'm gonna say that we don't need to bash science. Science is fantastic, right? We have physics and chemistry and mathematics and stuff like this that are hard laws. Anybody, and I've seen people in my camp refuting gravity, right? The equivalent of it. I'm saying this metaphorically, but I've seen some very anti-scientific statements, and it pisses me off, right? This is not why we do this, right? We're not trying to counter science, we're trying to counter bad science. But a lot of what has come out of the medical and nutrition studies has been so taken in such a reductive form as to not really be useful in living beings, right? So we have all this prevalence of disease, and we go, oh, you have a liver problem, let me study the function of the liver. Okay, by itself. Okay, well, it produces this chemical, this enzyme, or this chemical comes in and triggers that. Now the liver, responds this way. So I can make a pill, okay, but now you're ingesting this pill, and you're putting this, enzyme or whatever this chemical, transcriptase or whatever this deal is, that's a signal for this body in a place where it's never been in your body before. And you've now taken out of isolation the fact that the body's an entire system, right? So, and so you create an imbalance somewhere else. And this person ends up having, other symptoms and something that's going to kill them at the same rate as had they not done this, and it's not curative, right? So for me, a lot of these reductionist models of science they're not systems thinking approach, and we don't have the computing power currently to actually do it, because we're talking million variant problems. We're not talking about bivariate, regression analysis, statistical regression analysis, where it's something I can sit and whip out on a pin. It's impossible to keep track of all of the amount of inputs that go into a human body every day, because it really is stress and family and environment. And, I live in Houston, Texas, inside the loop, right? And so, there's estimates that say this is the equivalent of smoking a half pack of cigarettes a day, because the amount of pollution that I take into my lungs, right? If you add all these things up, we're talking about a model that's so complex, and allegedly quantum computing is going to get us to this generation where we can solve these complex problems. But I think that we have the problem is what we're doing with science is we're now trying to bend science to come up with solutions and outcomes, when the best of science was always supposed to just observe what is. And for me, what is, if humans were to halt life on Earth, we were to just pause, we were to go fly away for 100 years or 1,000 years, and we just came back to Earth, having our presence not on it, right? What would everything turn back into, and why? Because evolution doesn't waste time on unnecessary efforts. So the planet doesn't waste its time on unnecessary efforts. So fundamentally it would revert back to herbivores roaming on grasslands. All of our agricultural inventions would be gone. All of our buildings would crumble, right? And what we would be left with is a model of predators and herbivores, which the predators are there to just, trim the populations of sick animals as well as, maintain the populations that don't overgraze. And it's a perfect system, right? And so to me, I have to observe that natural system. And I have not seen anything that says, hey, what we just invented in the last 10,000 years that has caused all of our, likely that strongly correlates with all of our health problems and all the destruction of the planet and all this thing. It's a hard sell for me to go back and say that anything that violates this natural order of things would be the right step moving forward. It's like saying that, we need to keep inventing the next hill. And I'm not for stopping progress of humanity or seeing if we can get out into space, but there's a cost for this. Yeah. And the cost very, very well may be that we leave ourselves with no home so that we have to become space-faring species. But anyways, I don't know what's your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few points in there again. I was kind of smiling at the start there when you were talking about a lot about regenerative meat, specifically with like beef and stuff. And the first person that kind of comes to mind is Allan Savory. And he kind of like talks a lot about this. But then on the same part, like I've got a few things. I'm happy to share it with you unless you want me to touch on it now.
Sure, you can go ahead. I have the time if you want to, but
cool.
I have a feeling we'll probably end up doing these again. We'll get like we'll pick a topic, and then we'll just go like, hey, this is going to be our stance, and then we'll just twist our stance to refute that one thing. We can just go back and forth.
I'm just going to have like a YouTube category with your name on it.
That'd be cool.
I think you need to make me host again just so I can share, and I can do it.
Oh,
yeah, that's fine. I think it's under participants and you click more and then make host.
So all it shows me is invite. Yeah, I was looking for that. But let me see if I can do this. Let me go see if that multiple sharing thing works.
Oh yeah, I think I got it.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
So this is an article, so it's not scientific literature, but what they do is inside the article that they attach it to some articles. So some studies on here, which is this one in particular here is the one that kind of stood out the most, which was Grazed and Confused. And it quite literally stated the opposite of what this Allan guy was talking about. He was saying like, not just being carbon neutral, but actually like essentially fixing all the issues that we're having with carbon at the moment. And I went through it a little bit, like it's not too long here, but first of all, like for anyone watching as well, this video here kind of explains it and summarizes it quite well. I'm not going to show, I think it's like 8 minutes or something like that. But overall, the report findings is that better management of grass-fed livestock, while worthwhile in out of itself, does not offer a significant solution to climate change, as only under very specific conditions can they help sequester carbon. This sequestering of carbon is even then small, time limited, reversible, and substantially outweighed by the greenhouse gas emissions these grazing animals generate. The report concluded that although there can be other benefits to grazing livestock, solving climate change isn't one of them. So this is a really, really interesting thing that kind of, when the topic came up, and this was before I even spoke to you, when the topic came up, it was just like, I was like, oh, hang on, I'm going to just like learn a little bit more about this. And this is kind of like one of the first things that came up. On top of that, I've even witnessed this Allan guy, I can't find it now, but he was talking about how like science isn't going to be the solution to the problem. And it's quite funny because then he tries to state like science and things like that. This bit kind of really, really was interesting to me as well, because it has to do specifically with regenerative meat as well. So that 1 gram of protein per person per day comes from the grazing system, compared to the 27 grams of protein per person per day that comes from terrestrial animal protein. And yet 26% of Earth's terrestrial land surface is already taken by grazing system, meaning it is simply not possible for people to consume animal products at the same rate that we are now with resources that are available. So even before we had this conversation and debate, as much as it pains me to say this, the sort of like industrial meat industry that we have, where we have factory farming, in my opinion, from everything that I've seen, it's more environmentally friendly than grazing grass-fed beef. And I say that from someone who wants less animal deaths, right? It's crazy because like these, if you actually think about it, these systems are designed to be as efficient as possible. It makes sense that they're going to try and compress and put everything into a small space as possible, because they want to feed the number of people in this population, right? With the whole grass-fed argument, organic argument, these sort of things, they're not practical. They're not practical because when we talk about human beings, we're not talking about that one person who eats organic and grass-fed and backyard cows. We're talking about the whole population, right? We need to consider the whole population and not just, you know, what may even be more sustainable. Even if that were true, even if those things were true, they're not. Then they don't apply to the whole population that we're in.
Right. We have to be careful what goals we're seeking, though. Right.
Yeah.
You know, is zero emissions from a cow's butt a proper goal, or you know, is, if we limit the emissions and everything else that we're doing, right? Because to get to zero emissions, we have to stop life, essentially. I mean, that really is like, so zero, what we're looking for is a net zero function in society, or something that, like, because the environment, actually, the stratosphere does handle over time CO2 and methane gas emissions. It has a mechanism by which it, you know, regenerates it back into non-harmful gases that, you know, aren't causing climate change, right? So the problem for me with that is that, you know, well, we're not looking at a host of other factors. We're just looking at greenhouse gas emissions, which we're not looking at all of the runoff issues from CAFO feedlots that cause algal blooms that kill fish, that like are destroying lakes and, you know, our littoral and riparian systems. You know, we're not factoring in that animals grazing across soil, you know, chewing on the grass, you know, making it grow more, making it grow back up, you know, defecating in that grass, having other animals that go through that are feeding a host of like wild nature, that, you know, microbial functions, you know, mycolia, you know, like mushrooms, things like that, insects, you know, pollinators, all of these things that essentially are not being factored into what we have to do any kind of efficient mechanized agriculture, whether that's animal or plant. You know, I think the problem is that using science, we have made some incredible leaps and bounds as a species, but we've also taken the brakes off of natural systems that would have slowed our. So like, I also don't agree with like, hey, you know, we have too many people, let's go kill, you know, 3 billion of them. That's horrible. Like I'm not, I'm not a psychopath, right? But what I'm saying is, if we limit systems, then the systems themselves would naturally limit the amount of resources available and would curb population on its own, right? And that may be what we have to look at. It's like, what do we do with the limitations of the planet and the resources that we have? Can we put 10 billion people on there? Like, if we can feed more people with plant-based agriculture, should we? I don't think we should. I don't think we should raise more land and destroy more trees and you know, compete with nature anymore than we already are, right? And so for me, looking at regenerative agriculture is more of looking at a natural system that existed, that predates us, you know, millions and millions and millions and millions and hundreds of millions of years, right? It's not, you know, it's without question, this is just naturally what the earth chose for itself. And it shows that with a great deal of you know, what infinite wisdom, if you want to call it that, if you have the Gaia approach to Earth, or the living Earth approach, you know, I mean, it's selected this for a reason. And everything that runs counter to that, to me, violates first principles. It violates the first principles of the Earth, right? And so I think we're struggling to figure out ways to bend science to, you know, fit what we're doing. But what has worked on Earth, for like why it chooses these systems, for me, is much more important than what we've created with our own invention in the last 100 years.
Yeah, there's a few few great interesting points again in there. I mean, I have so many more questions to go through.
Yeah,
but,
for sure.
I don't want to take up too much of your time. I guess one last quick one. I did have two, but I'm just going to bring it down to one. Like, has your position on the matter changed at all during this call?
No, not at all. I mean, I'm not just like, I mean, I am the N equals 1 is carnivore works for me because I have autoimmune issues with plants, and that's become, patently clear to me that that's the source of that. I am trying to figure out, and I do like this whole, questioning the regenerative farming thing. I mean, we need to be objective about things and not just, be dogmatic. I want to continue these discussions and see. I want to see some positive examples because a lot of the carnivore community are ex-vegans. I don't know, at least the ones that I'm friends with. There's a large population of us that have been vegan in the past and had some pretty bad results from it. And both of us as a dietary profile, probably we represent such a minority. I don't know what's the population percentage of vegan to global population. Do you know that number?
I have no idea, to be honest. I've heard speculation everywhere from 1 to 10%. So I'm not sure.
Like that.
Yeah.
I think if you're looping in vegetarianism, you probably could get that 10% number, but I think you'd have a without loosening the bounds on it. Vegan is probably, it's probably in that 1 to 2%. Carnivores have to be the same. If you're not considering, like tribes, of like people that are living, naturally in a tribal gathered environment, right? So in modern society, we're just not that much either. So we just, it's real hard for us to say with any conclusive amount like what the state is. And I see people that over periods of veganism start to have some health decline. I mean, there's also, I'll bring up some isotope studies later when we talk about it. There's some regions that, saw like an environmental change, and they studied those bones, and there was significant damage on those bones that wasn't present. And some like, deformities and things like that weren't non-existent in generations before. And so that's a very interesting concept. This shows that there was like a lack of like proper healing, or that there was some sort of downward genetic evolution of those people in that region. So I think it was Central America, I'm pretty sure, but I'll have to do that for that. But yeah, no, I haven't changed my stance at all. And I think that it's better for people on the planet, but I question, is it good for people on the planet as is, or what needs to change? I don't know. I'm still trying to figure all this stuff out.
Yeah. So I think for the same question for me.
Yeah.
No, not really, because just a philosophical belief. Because I thought about this question, and I really think it gets a lot of people, carnivores in particular, to really think about this sort of stance, and actually even mostly omnivores too. But for me, like you'd have to like my whole stance is that to reduce as much unnecessary suffering and death as possible. I believe a vegan lifestyle is the best way to do that. And again, you could argue, like I believe plants are alive. I don't believe that they're sentient. And even if they were, I still think you would be reducing the most amount of harm, because the animals that you eat need to eat plants anyway. So you're minimizing that. And according to the numbers I've seen, there's 10 times more livestock than humans, which just begs the question. It's unsurprising that the numbers say that they're eating about 80% of our plant-based foods. So again, it's kind of like this cycle of false economy, which is just the reason. You'd have to reverse everything in my mindset about that. You'd have to be able to say that animals do want to die. Like that's pretty much what you'd have to.
Well, animals are going to die. I don't know that anything wants to die, and that plants don't want to die, animals don't want to die, bugs don't want to, nothing wants to die. So I think that inherently all things are resistant to that, because that's not good for the species. But it's also part of like necessary evolution. Like some species live 100 years, some live 1 day or a few days, right? And for whatever reason, that's some in evolution serves some function that they don't live past a certain point, because they don't start developing all kinds of other diseases that would kill them. Like there's a function to it, right? And healthy systems in nature don't have, deer, reaching 20 years old. Like they get eaten by a predator before they reach that point, and so there's, and that's better for their evolution. So in many ways, there's so much more we can cover on this. And so that's why I hope we keep doing this, because I really enjoy it. And I think you're an amazing guy. I commend you for what you're doing. I'm never going to take away anything from. I think where we are very similar in our beliefs is that we're seeking the truth, right? And we may land on different things, and we may evolve. One of the reasons I've been very resistant to be public and very resistant to actually start doing influencing. I'm working on other things. I have businesses that I care about, but is that there's two things that happen. One, people treat people on the internet in a way that I think is horrific, right? I think you can see between me and there's a lot of love in my heart. I don't have any hatred towards anybody. And that's why we're able to have this discussion, right? So, I think a lot of people will try to reduce me down to he kills animals, so therefore he's a horrible person. I'm not, right? Obviously that data doesn't work out. And the other one is that, if we follow our respective followings, and the more followers that we get, the more we become deified by our followers, right? And one thing that people hate is an inconsistent God. And they will burn their inconsistent God at the cross, right? Meaning, it's real hard. And I don't think that you have this problem. I think you're a very objective guy. But it's real hard when you get, 100,000 followers or 1 million followers or people that are following you. And one day you go, you know what, this isn't working for me anymore. I'm not a vegan anymore. I believe this data. You're going to, I've avoided this because I don't want to get trapped into other people's forced expectations of me. I think it's the same thing that happens to, stars in Hollywood or something like that, right? You become a character that people identify with, and people want you to always be that character, and you don't get to be anything else. If you're something else, it pisses me off, right? And so, I'm real reluctant to follow in the path of my other peers that want to go into the influencing space in carnivore. I don't know that I will. Maybe I will. I don't know. I've got to amass a lot more data on my end and keep reading studies and keep bringing this stuff to the fore through these kind of discussions. Because anytime you challenge me, it gives me okay, I need to go answer this question. Right? I don't readily have this information on hand. So I see this as a net benefit, and I want the truth to win. If your truth is the truth, then we'll go with it. But for now, I'm going to stick to the guns and carnivore. But I think you'll find challenges in your if you ever were to find this data to be truthful. I don't know what you would do, man. I guess just disappear off the face of the internet.
So that's a good thing. I would like to ask now if you could send me the resources from today, from the data that you've used. I can put that in the caption below this video so people can check it out for themselves. I'll put in anything that I've got as well, plus any added information that you didn't mention today and that I didn't mention today. I'd love for you to share it with me so I can kind of review it myself. And if you would like me to return the favor,
Yeah, I think what we could do is maybe if we're gonna make these a little shorter, like shorter soundbite type things where we have 30 minutes or less. We'll
Sure.
pick specific topics and maybe create a drive and just kind of go back and forth and load data into it, like a shared drive folder. And that way we can look at it that way. And we don't have to do it before we go into it. We just say, hey, this is going to be the topic this month or whatever. And we're going to spend 30 minutes on just this. We'll give each other some information. We'll figure out what we want to argue, what our debate is going to be on, and then we'll counter each other on that. I think that'd be a good way to do that going forward. And that way it stays very focused and also, shorter for the number of people that don't want to sit and watch 2-3 hour conversations. Because I could go over it. I really do.
Absolutely. For that reason, I'm going to wrap it up now, but I do want to say one last thing. I also commend you as well for being here today, which I think is fantastic. You're a great guy, very reasonable to talk to as well. I know for a fact that many vegans are not very reasonable to talk to as well. So if anyone's vegan right now might be criticizing him or might be saying anything negative about him, just be appreciative of the fact that he's able to have an open discussion about it, because at the end of the day, we can't talk to people who aren't going to have a conversation with us about any topic, any form of social injustice, anything at all. So thank you so much for being here today. And that's it. I'm going to put all the stuff below this video, all the links and stuff. And yeah, I look forward to chatting to you soon.
Yeah, thanks again, Adam. And I have the same thoughts and feelings about the carnivore community. I hope that they don't continue to attack vegans. I mean, I kind of understand where people are attacking each other, it becomes a ratchet.
Yeah.
And it just goes back and forth. But I don't think this is constructive for either of us, because ultimately what we're trying to do is seek the truth. And so we just got to continue to share information with each other. So thanks so much, Adam. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Yep.
Bye.